Education meeting of November 12, 2024 is called to order. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda in order of priority. Are there any items that board members would like to add or delete from the agenda? Hearing and seeing none.
Mr. Chairman,
may I please have a motion?
I do wish to amend the agenda. So I move to amend the agenda under item F. Change the title to Discussion of U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights Complaints, Approval of Nominations to the Special Education Advisory Committee, and Presentation of Special Education Advisory Committee Annual Report.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Ms. Snyder, I don't recall getting this from you 24 hours in advance of the board meeting.
It's not a resolution. It's an amendment to the agenda itself.
It is an amendment to the agenda, but the same rules hold.
I would not interpret it the same way.
Very good. So we have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any discussion associated therewith?
Yes, I'll speak to the motion to amend the agenda on this topic. We talked about this a couple of months ago. It is very necessary that we address these civil rights complaints, especially as it relates to special education, and that the Special Education Advisory Committee be made up of members that are nominated and approved according to their capacity to understand the issue and go to bat for special education students.
Read your amendment again, please.
Amend item F to change the title to Discussion of U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights Complaints, Approval of Nominations to the Special Education Advisory Committee, and Presentation of Special Education Advisory Committee Annual Report.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. Motion from Ms. Snyder, second from Mr. McMillan. Any other discussion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just say that, procedurally, I know that there has been an understanding that resolutions come before us 24 hours before or are distributed, but I am quite certain that there's never been anything about changes to the agenda. As a matter of fact, I know that things have been removed from the agenda without 24-hour notice, and I believe probably added, maybe not by the two of us, but certainly by the administration. So I don't think that that's a rule.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. We've had some discussion. Is there any more discussion before we have a roll call vote?
I just have a question. I unfortunately was not able to attend the agenda planning meeting, so I was not there. But and this is just, a question, is that not the appropriate time to discuss different ways to populate the agenda so that the department can then be prepared to provide the information and have a robust discussion? I'm just thinking about the infrastructure, because I understand the 24-hour rule and what have you, but to put something on now, it doesn't seem to really allow for the department to have in any way be prepared to respond to questions, and I would think that would be the purpose of the agenda planning meeting.
Right. So,
but I wasn't there, so I can't speak to that.
Sure.
So I
that
apologize.
the issue was unmentioned at the agenda planning meeting. Number one, to your point, Ms. Lipton, it would be the last opportunity to shape the agenda for a given month. We typically shape agendas over a period of months. It would be the last opportunity to shape that agenda before having it. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Ms. Snyder.
I would just, rebut that, because 2 months ago, we talked about this being an issue that needs to be addressed before we approve the nominations. So 2 months in advance certainly beats out 24 hours in advance, which doesn't even apply to amending the agenda when it's necessary to amend it, which, as Tom has pointed out, we've done before. So yes, the Agenda Setting Committee serves the purpose of setting the agenda, and then there is a reality that exists well above and beyond that sometimes it needs to be added to, changed, or edited in such a fashion.
Okay, so we have a motion. We have a second. We've had discussion. Any other discussion? Hearing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Evans.
Mr. Bullock?
Negative.
Lipton,
No.
McMillan,
Yes.
Pritchett,
No.
Pugh,
Pass.
Robinson,
No.
Snyder,
Yes.
and Tilly is absent. Motion fails.
I have one more amendment.
Please.
Again, this is an amendment to the agenda. And my final amendment, or the final amendment that I know that we're going to make, I make a motion to amend the agenda to add item M, as in Mary, for a discussion and possible action on the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights complaint regarding special education that is currently before a federal administrative law judge.
So moved.
We have a motion, we have a second. Would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I mean, we have been talking about this item. We have, even I know Democrats have said that they would like to have a discussion on this as well. And the fact that it's been hidden from this board for a couple of years, something as important as this matter, I think it's intolerable that we've gone this long without a discussion. I think we should, again, like I said last meeting, we should have a robust discussion. They've got until after lunch. They can certainly, MDE can certainly, they've got a ton of staff. They can figure out how to make sure that we have a good discussion about it. And I believe this board should come to a resolution and direct the state superintendent, our one employee, on how we want him to go forward. And I believe that we should go forward like the other states that have had problems in this area. It should come to a resolution that is satisfactory to both the families that were harmed and the students and the state. And so I certainly think, I find it, during this election, we talked about this issue, Nikki and I kept saying, I can't believe Democrats are turning a blind eye to the harm that's been done and the injustice to those in special education, the families. And it baffles me, and people just shake their heads. They can't believe it. So I would really implore you to put this on as item M. Thank you.
So we have a motion, we have a second. Any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please, Ms. Evans.
Bullock,
No.
Lipton,
No.
McMillan,
Yes.
Pritchett,
No.
Pugh,
No.
Robinson,
No.
Snyder,
Yes.
and Tilly absent. Motion fails.
Thank you very much. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Pugh, seconded by Dr. Pritchett. Is there any discussion associated therewith? Hearing and seeing none, if we could have a roll call vote, please.
Bullock,
Yes.
Lipton,
Yes.
McMillan,
No.
Pritchett,
Yes.
Pugh,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Snyder,
No.
and Tilly absent. Motion carries.
Thank you, Board. At 9:43, Ms. Liz Evans, State Board Executive, will introduce members of the State Board of Education.
Good morning. You have just been listening to Dr. Michael Rice, Chairperson of the State Board and State Superintendent. To his left around the table is Board President Dr. Pamela Pugh from Saginaw, Board Co-Vice President Ms. Ellen Cogan-Lipton from Huntington Woods, NASB Delegate Dr. Mitchell Robinson from Okemos, Ms. Nikki Snyder, and Ms. Kelly Kuzmano, the 24-25 Michigan Teacher of the Year. And now seated to my right is Mr. Tom McMillan from Oakland Township, Board Treasurer Mr. Marshall Bullock from Detroit, Board Co-Vice President Ms. Tiffany Tilley from West Bloomfield, who is on her way, so I am announcing that she will be here, and Board Secretary Dr. Judith Pritchett from Washington Township. Virtually, we have joining us today Ms. Emma Young, the staff member representing the Governor's Office.
Can I introduce?
Thank
Can I
you, Ms.
introduce
Evans. Please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to introduce, there's some students here that are visiting that I spoke with before the meeting, and very intelligent students from the Government and Civics class for the Livingstone Homeschool Cooperative here in the Lansing area. So appreciate you all coming.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. The public may register to provide comment during the public participation portion of the meeting at approximately 1 p.m. Those wishing to make public comment must register before 1 p.m. To provide public comment by telephone, please complete the registration form on the MDE webpage, www.michigan.gov/MDE. To provide public comment in person, please complete a green public comment form when you arrive here at the meeting location. These instructions are listed on the MDE webpage at www.michigan.gov/MDE. First item on today's agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting is a presentation on the importance of a school library. During today's presentation, we welcome a student from Godfrey Lee Public Schools who will read a poem that she has written about the importance of a school library, followed by reflections from staff of Godfrey Lee Public Schools. Godfrey Lee Middle/High School was recently awarded the Library of Michigan's prestigious SL21 School Library of the 21st Century designation. We welcome our presenters, Mr. Randy Riley, State Librarian, Library of Michigan, Dr. Arnetta Thompson, Superintendent of Godfrey Lee Public Schools, Mr. Harry Koffel, Library Media Specialist, Godfrey Lee Public Schools, and our budding poet, Ariana, a student in the Godfrey Lee Public Schools. You may please join us at the table. Also attending today's meeting is Mr. Andy Steckety, High School Principal, Godfrey Lee Public Schools, Ms. Addie Rose, Middle School Principal, Godfrey Lee Public Schools, Ariana's parents, the Nickersons, Aaliyah, a student from Godfrey Lee Public Schools, Ashley, another student from Godfrey Lee Public Schools, and if you are picking up the trend, Caitlin, third student from Godfrey Lee Public Schools. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required. Ariana, Dr. Thompson, Mr. Koffel, Mr. Riley, welcome.
Thank you.
Great. Real quickly, I'm Randy Riley, the state librarian. The Library of Michigan, one of our programs is School Libraries of the 21st Century, a program to help improve services, do what we can to help school libraries. And as part of that program, we select a model school library every year to be recognized. And this year's recipient was a Godfrey Lee Middle and High School Library because of the tremendous work that they're doing and the fabulous way that they have connected with students and teachers in their building. Dr. Rice and I and several other members of MDE were part of an event there recognizing their library in early October. And when we were there, Ariana was not there in person, but we got to see on video, she read her poem about the importance of school libraries. And we thought it would be a good idea to have them come in and talk a little bit about what's happening at Godfrey Lee. So I turn it over to the folks from Godfrey Lee.
Good morning. I am Arnetta Thompson. I'm the proud superintendent of Godfrey Lee Public Schools. Thank you for inviting us and all of the supporters for our very own Ariana Wheeler. At Godfrey Lee, our vision for our students is to be you, be connected, and be brilliant. And I can honestly say that Ms. Wheeler is leaning into that. She has a beautiful personality, a gorgeous smile, and she is committed to advocating for the things that she needs for herself. She's connected because she's one of our student athletes. She has lifelong friends that are supporting her, and she has a very good family relationship. And so today, you'll get to experience some of the brilliance that we see every day with her and her poems. So I introduce you to Ariana Wheeler.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Good morning. It's my deepest pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Ariana Wheeler. I am a 15-year-old sophomore at Lee High School. Before I begin, I wanted to preface how I got to this point. As long as I can remember, I've been somewhat of a bookworm. This can be credited to my lovely mother sitting behind me, who is the reason I love books today. One of the first chapter books I remember reading, even though I'm sure I read plenty before that, is The Bridge to Terabithia. I got grounded one time, and I wanted something to do, and I kept falling asleep, and my mom's like, that won't slide, so she gave me the book to read. As I grew, my love for words, for books, only expanded. So naturally, in the 4th grade, a team of friends and I created a story called Half Devil, Half Angel. And my love for words continued to spiral from there. I fell in love with the music and words of singer/songwriter Halsey, so I began to write songs, which led to poetry. I discovered Halsey wrote a poetry book and found a PDF of it, which led to 7th grade me writing 3 poems titled I Hate Everybody, inspired by Halsey's 3 poems, Bad Day. And I showed these poems to my late 7th grade math teacher, Mr. Lozano, He told me I had a talent and to never quit writing, so I kept writing. And here and there, I would dedicate pieces of my writings to him. Now, every piece of poetry I write is dedicated to him, since without him, I wouldn't be sitting in front of you all today to share my poetry about the importance of libraries. So thank you all for this opportunity. I promise not to take it in vain. I see poetry as a brilliant form of expression as well as an apparatus. Before I say what I was asked here to share, I wanted to share the book, Halsey's poetry book, I Would Leave Me If I Could, and the words on a piece of cardboard by Mr. Lozana wrote me as a farewell to middle school that says, "Y se puede," which he taught me roughly translates to "yes, you can." And he was right, because I am here today in front of you all. So I really could do it. Now, for my poem, A Place to Belong. Something shaped everybody, and everybody shaped me. I fought off isolation a lot as a kid. Whether I was grounded or jumping friend group to friend group, there was never a win. I fought some battles silently, alone in my head. Then I learned to fight the bad thoughts with the books that I read. There's a book for everybody, otherwise it's not a library. There's some libraries so big that they're the stuff of legends, but libraries begin where the home and the heart is. And from science geeks and heartbreak lovers, fairy tales and magazine covers, World War II books and the lines on the pages that form the poems of which I read every day. I remember the first time I found myself on a page, and that's what makes a reader. Every section has its phase. And now I'm here to say something so great that has brought us all together no matter how far we stray. There's laptops with books which are also on phones. There's connections embedded from pages we read stuck in our domes. And that's what reading is. It's a connection. It's a home. And that's what it is for me. It's a place to belong. Because when the world gets too much to handle, I'm certain I can always find safety with a book in my arms. It could be Batman or poetry, Halsey, Taylor Swift, Harry Potter, Twilight, The Hunger Games. If it has words, I'll read it. People may tell us we aren't alone, and that's true. With the connection and comfort a book offers, we'll never be alone. We'll always have a home within the pages that we condone. Thank you.
That was terrific. Big lover of poetry, and the first time I heard you recite that at Godfrey Lee, virtually, I was taken by the poem, and I thought this would be a good forum for you to share your talent.
Thank you.
Panelists, would you like to share a little bit of,
You know, we are so proud that we were named the School Library of the 21st Century.
Mhm.
That is due to the National School Library Standards: inquire, include, collaborate, explore, and engage. 85% of our students at Godfrey Lee are English language learners. In 2016, when I took over, we had 30 Spanish language books in our library. But now over 10% of our collection is in Spanish due to some help from some grant writing. I think we received $10,000 worth of books due to grants last year, that all for our English language learners. Also, our students, including Ariana, played a key role in designing the new library space we've created. Godfrey Lee literally put our new facility at the heart of our building. We were just discussing it this morning. Our board meeting was in our new creation space that we made yesterday. So it's great that we've helped our students in the design, but also that they can find books in their home language. So we encourage them to read regardless of the language that they're reading in, so they can better adapt towards their new situations. Our average copyright in our library has raised. We have genre-revised our 6,000 books, making it easier for our students to find stories that resonate with them. But despite our progress, Michigan ranks 46 in the nation for school library staffing, and about 49% of our Michigan schools lack any library staff. Studies show that access to diverse library materials is linked to higher reading scores, and certified school librarians boost student literacy, especially among our most vulnerable populations. Losing school librarians and facing funding cuts and book bans disproportionately affects students in high poverty and racially diverse areas. I do thank you for the chance to share Ariana's words with you today and to be with you today. I would welcome you and educators, Michigan board members, any teachers. We just hosted 2 teachers from China last week to come visit our library space due to our SL21 endorsement, so very exciting. Please let me know if you'd like to visit at any time, because I would love to show off what we do at Godfrey Lee Libraries. So thank you very much. Are there any questions that anyone might have today?
Please, Mr. Bullock.
First, I want to know, what were you doing that you keep getting grounded?
I wasn't doing my hair and then I lied about it.
You can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. Keep doing what you do. Now, you go find that.
With a nod to Rudyard Kipling.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. If, beautiful poem. And one day she may be mentioned in the same breath with Rudyard Kipling.
Absolutely.
Right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bullock. Ms. Lipton.
First, thank you, Ariana,
course.
for having the poise and grace to come here and share your beautiful poetry and your gift. And thank you to the folks from your school to talk about what they've done. I just have a question regarding the sort of the importance of space, because I know that a lot of schools, a lot of school bonds, construction bonds have recently failed. Can you just talk to me a little bit about the importance of new spaces to enhance, sort of, I think a lot of people, the old vision is sort of you go in and there's just shelves and shelves and shelves, and I've been in some newer libraries. I haven't had the privilege to go to your school library, but I've been some where they have redone the space, and it's really much more of like a collaborative resource space. But reconfiguring the space and even adding on the space has been really, really important. Retrofitting buildings. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of investment in spatial reconstruction in creating these very vibrant learning centers within schools?
We really had the opportunity at Godfrey Lee to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. If you don't know, we had a horrible accident the day after school got out several years ago where part of our building collapsed due to age. So we were in a space where creating a new space was very, very important. And in doing that, we were able to redesign much of our facility to better serve our students all over our building. So we were able to create new classrooms, do new wiring. Our building is now accessible from any point in the building for our handicapped students. Being able to do that was incredibly important. It used to be that our wheelchair students couldn't literally get to parts of our building due to the age of it, and now all of those are fixed. In creating our library, and Ariana and Miss Rose were a huge part of our design on that, creating that flexibility as well as focusing on the point that it was a library was very important to us. Everything in our library is currently mobile. Everything is on wheels. We can rearrange it. As a librarian, I really like that. If I have an English teacher who's saying, hey, I want to do historical fiction, I can literally move the historical fiction to the front of the library without rearranging hundreds of static shelves. We created a study space in the back corner of our library that my friend in the sweatshirt there, that's one of her favorite spots. So, but places that kids can come in and sit together and work and get a project done. You know, libraries are more than just the books that we carry. It's creating that welcoming space, which you heard very well in Ariana's poem. A place that our kids belong, a place that our kids can be, a place, I always just use the phrase, a place for them to exist in our building. You know, previously our students would sit outside the classroom on the floor and doing their studying because there was no space for them to do that. Now we have comfortable, open, study, brightly lit spaces to create. So it's important, but I think it's important that we had a lot of voice in that. I had teachers on that committee, I had administration on that committee. We did have the benefit of a marvelous $150,000 grant from the Department of Education that we used to purchase furniture. We were able to redecorate all of our libraries with that grant that we got. So we replaced furniture that was going on 40 years old in 2 of our libraries, and we're able to put all new furnishings in the brand-new library and really create a great K-12 library experience for our students that's very similar because the furniture and the shelving and the like distribution of it is all the same now between kindergarten and 12th grade. So as our students progress, they'll have a very similar experience as they go through all of our libraries. So it's been very powerful for us to be able to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead.
Sorry, those flexible spaces is what we call them. Give students just the opportunity to check in with each other or just to find a little nook for themselves. And we have 2 based on that new construction and a lot of flexible seating options where students can just hang out. But it's a place for staff and the community to gather as well. So we're really excited about the spaces that have been created out of the tragedy of that roof collapse.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, as state librarian, I get to visit a lot of public school academic libraries. And when you walk into that space, it is not book warehouse, although there are lots of materials for kids to read. It's an active, vibrant classroom kind of vibe when you go into that space. And the thing that was really telling to me, and I think Dr. Rice as well, is how important it was to the students that we got to interact with. It was their space. It was important to them, and it made a difference in what they were doing in school on a daily basis. And that's you can't say anything much better than that.
Ariana was the first student that I walked into the space. And do you remember what you said?
No.
She said, "Can I live here?"
Oh, I did. I did. It was a complete change. The last library was on the top floor of the school. It was almost isolated, and the new one, it has a space for every kid to go. In March, we had an opportunity to technically publicly open the library, like a celebration for it. And then I had said I have never seen so many kids go to the library. There's kids who go there to do their work because sometimes there will be puzzles or chess out on the tables, and they're like, I've never seen so many kids strive to get their work done to do a puzzle, especially my age. Oh, puzzles, okay. And it's when you're done with your work and you don't want to sit in the awkward silence of a classroom, it's always a good place to go. Or when the classroom's too loud, and someone just wants to escape. And then with the area that's been created, it's open. It's there's windows on the left side?
Yeah.
The left side that allow a lot of sunlight in, which I think is really good. There's tables lined up near those windows. There's constantly getting new additions to the books we read, and Mr. Koffel does a very good job at making sure the students get what they want to read, because with this book, I had requested it because I didn't I was like, I don't know where to get this, and he's like, we'll put it in the school library, because he's always been open for requests. And then I had read the book so many times that earlier this year, as a early 15th birthday present, he gave me the book. And there's been the students recommend books to each other, and every time my friends want to get a book, but they're like, I don't got the money right now. I was like, go ask Mr. Koffel if he can put it in on his next book order. There's a good chance you'll read it by the time your next birthday hits. And it's just a lovely space for the kids to go, and my friends enjoy it. The teachers enjoy it because sometimes they can it's like a reward for some kids. It helps them get on task and do their work. If I finish this, I can go to the flex space or the library, and kids are checking out new books because they're in the area, and it's just a very good thing that I've noticed.
Thank you.
Ariana, who are your literary forebears? Who are your literary heroes?
I'm a teenager, so I can say books because typically I read more of series and then don't explore the author. But Bridge to Terabithia will forever be a classic for me, thanks to my mother. And 5th grade, reading all of Harry Potter became a competition between me and a kid. Then I read Twilight, as every teenage girl does, and became obsessed. I ventured into poetry, reading what I could find online, reading Halsey's book. I've read a million others. I think I have one right now in my bedroom from our school library titled something along the lines of Poems About Grass, and it's very interesting. I've never seen nature described in such a way. Typically, I describe emotion within a person.
This is poems about grass,
Yes,
not leaves of grass?
just grass.
Okay.
Just grass. It's interesting.
Please.
So first of all, thank you so much. As a high school English teacher, you killed it. And I just wanted to reiterate what Godfrey Lee is experiencing as I've been traveling around the state of Michigan. Like the status of libraries in spaces and in different schools is all over the map. I cannot lift up what you said about libraries being gathering places and more than just book depositories. They are places where, there's few spaces right now, I feel like, in a very divided country where kids can sit down and have conversations with each other. And the library certainly fills that role. And kids doing puzzles and, kids reading and people doing all sorts of just community building. And a library is the space for that. And I just thank your work, and that sounds like a lovely home to like dwell in, and I just think it is so important for kids all over the state to just have a space like that. So I just thank you so much for your hard work.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing, and you should check out Leaves of Grass. It's not a bad text.
So, I love the shout out to your former teacher, and I think that's really, really powerful. Maya Angelou gave a shout out to Paul Laurence Dunbar in writing her first book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. It's a nod to a poem by Dunbar from 75 years earlier. Lorraine Hansberry gave a shout out to Langston Hughes in writing her poem, A Raisin in the Sun, a reference to a poem that Dunbar had written a decade or two earlier called Harlem, about a dream deferred. And then finally, Lin-Manuel Miranda gave a shout out to Notorious B.I.G. in Hamilton. And if you don't know, now you know. So I share that because I do think it's important to remember the shoulders on which you stand. And I appreciate at a young age you recognizing that, because it's pretty rare for a 15-year-old to have that sense of self-reflection. Please.
Yeah, since the district librarian brought up the term book ban, I guess I'll go there. Mr. Cofill, if I'm curious, is there any inappropriate books for the elementary schools or the high school that you would just find inappropriate for their library?
We have a robust book selection plan. My reflection on that is the same that I do at the high school.
Just a yes or no question.
No.
No, you think any book is fine in an elementary school?
Were you asking about my library or?
Yeah,
any
your library.
Yes.
There is inappropriate books.
I'm sorry, I think you
Are
flipped that on
there
me.
inappropriate books that you would not put in the elementary library?
There are books that I would not select for an elementary
Because they're
library.
inappropriate, or not at their level?
There's more than one standard for deciding what's appropriate for a library.
Okay,
So,
but
yes.
that's not a book ban, that would be just not putting an inappropriate book in a library,
That's-
or, yeah.
That's
Okay.
curation, which is one of the things that a librarian does.
I just want to make sure you understood the difference. Now, I don't know if you've seen them, but, sometimes a parent will get up at a local school board meeting and read from a book, and the board will say, you can't read from that, you can't read that in front of us because it's too vile, it's too bad. Do you think a book like that should still be in a library if it's not even allowed to be read to the school board?
I think that books have book selection policies and requests for reconsideration policies for that very reason. And I think that that system is how a book should be selected or deselected for a book's selection before it gets stood up and publicly proclaimed using small, out-of-context snippets of a book.
Okay, but it's not banning, it's just saying that it's inappropriate. I appreciate that you understand the difference. I didn't think you did. Thank you.
Be nice to the guests.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McMillan, Mr. Koffel, Ms. Snyder.
Ariana, this moment is yours, and the poem is it's really just incredible. There are parts in it that I think highlight, what a lot of students are going through right now and have gone through since COVID, and it should be accessible to everyone. And before you go today, I would just encourage you, there's always politics to just about any situation, including libraries. I encourage you and others around you to, refuse that division and just open your mind to the nuance of making sure that you continue to do what you do so well. Making sure there's access, but also that there's appropriate curation. And there is a good opportunity here to walk away still in love with books and also the critical thinking of libraries itself. So, thank you.
Anyone else for the good of the group? Going once, twice, thrice. So Ariana, in 20 years, there may be a 15-year-old girl or boy who looks up to you and talks about reading your works and how impactful those works are to her or him. So thank you very much. We appreciate you. Dr. Thompson, Mr. Koffel, thank you so much for raising the flag for public libraries and public librarians and the importance of literacy and our book collections. And Mr. Riley, thank you very much for continuing the fight. Next item on today's agenda is the annual All Goals presentation of Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan. During this presentation, we will share information on progress toward the 8 goals of Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan. Chief Deputy Superintendent Dr. Susie Carnell and I will present. This is an informational presentation. No board action is required, and there will be a fairly extensive PowerPoint presentation.
Did you get communication from Tiffany?
Are we sharing? Or
Yes.
We are.
We
Okay,
are.
cool.
Is that okay with you?
I have no problem with it at all. I just want to understand things are.
I loved that grass poetry part. That made me laugh.
And it was, the question I have is, was it Leaves of Grass or not? I still want to explore that with her. I may actually give her a call and see if we were talking about Walt Whitman or not.
That was great.
I'm sure there's a way for me to get to it.
World's longest poem,
Yeah.
and one he worked on for, I think, 2 decades or something like that. It's crazy.
Right now, just hold on 2 seconds.
Okay, I
I
think
believe I lost my quorum.
Got it?
found it.
Yeah, I know
stateofmichigan.sharepoint.com. Yes.
Dr.
Yeah,
Pritchard.
I think I'm gonna make a bookmark out of this. Yeah.
If you need help, let me know.
SharePoint.com.
Okay, cool. Board, good morning again. It's a pleasure to present to you progress toward the 8 goals of Michigan's Top 10 Strategic Education Plan. You know we do this full goals presentation once a year for you. We cut up presentations on different of the goals throughout the year, depending upon what data becomes available at what time during the year. Is frozen. Well, that's a short presentation. So the 8 goals of the top 10 strategic education plan are here. You know that the 2 resource upstream goals, to address the teacher shortage and to improve adequate and equitable school funding, affect everything else resource downstream. And similarly, the developmental upstream goals, to expand early childhood education, to improve early literacy, and to improve health, safety, and wellness, help drive all other downstream goals, specifically goals 4, secondary school program expansion, goal 5, graduation rate improvement, and goal 6, post-secondary credential rate improvement. Today's presentation is an annual update. We'll celebrate big wins for kids in all 8 goal areas, and we'll share district and state efforts for the various goals. We're going to begin in a somewhat different way than we have in the past, board. We're not going to do this goals 7, 8, 1 through 6, but rather a little bit jaggedly presenting the more recent information about improvements associated with these goals. We'll begin with goal 4, the expansion of secondary learning opportunities for all students. We'll go back and forth, Dr. Carnell and I. We'll do 2 goals apiece, co-piloting so you don't get used to the same drone for the entire presentation. So the goal 4, we have 6 sets of success measures: AP, CTE, dual enrollment, early middle college, IB, and special education transition services. Let's begin with AP. So with respect to advanced placement, we've increased the number of young people taking AP courses by 8,500 kids, 12.3% in the last 2 years. And this increase is not solely concentrated in a single ethnic group. This is across ethnic groups. You can see double-digit increases among Black students, Latino students, students of 2 or more races, and Asian students. Big increases across the board. You can also see big increases for economically disadvantaged students, a 35% increase in the number of economically disadvantaged students taking AP courses over the last 2 years. But it's not simply the taking of courses that we're seeing increases in. We're also seeing increases associated with the number of AP tests that young people take and their success on those tests. Because remember, if you take an AP test, if you do well on that test, it's defined as a 3, 4, or 5. Often, not always, but often, you get college credit when you go to college. So this is a running head start for college if you do well in AP courses. Notice that in the last 2 years, the number of students taking 1 or more AP exams has increased by 10,800, a 20% increase, and the number of AP tests taken has increased by 26.4%, or 23,000 tests. And again, this is not solely a function of a single ethnic group or a couple of ethnic groups. This is largely, not completely, but largely across the board. You can see big increases for Black students in the last 2 years, taking 1 or more AP exam, Latino students, students of 2 or more races, white students, and Asian students as well. But it's not simply the taking of tests. It's not simply the taking of the courses and the taking of the tests. It's the doing well at the end of the year. In the last 2 years, notice the increases here, board, in the number of students with scores 3, 4, or 5. Scores that often, again, not always, but often generate college credit when young people go to college. An increase of 10,597 students with scores of 3, 4, or 5 in the last 2 years. That's a 31% jump and far eclipses the pre-pandemic number, far eclipses the pre-pandemic number. And the number of exams with scores 3, 4, or 5, an increase of 37%, almost 21,000 exams with scores 3, 4, or 5, and that too far eclipses any pre-pandemic number that you see on the chart. So this is a tribute not only to our students, but also to our educators as well. Our educators, our counselors, our support staff, and others that are pushing advanced placement, this increased rigor for our young people. And that increased rigor takes on many different forms, Ms. Kuzmano. We're agnostic as to form, but we are not agnostic as to rigor. We believe that more rigor is important, that you reflect upon that quote, a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what else is heaven for? We should always be reaching in what we do in education. But look at the increases across the board in students with scores 3, 4, 5 by ethnicity. Look at the double-digit increases for Latino students, students of 2 or more races, and Asian students and white students, and the triple-digit increases for Black students. Those should be celebrated. We appreciate the hard work of our local educators, the hard work of our students to make this happen. So what has the state done in this regard? Well, you know we've been drumbeating around greater rigor and all forms of greater rigor in Goal 4. And in 2022, we sent 40,000 letters to the parents of young people whose PSAT scores indicated that they were likely going to be successful in AP courses, whether or not, Dr. Chapman, they were ever recommended for those AP courses. We sent 90,000 of those letters last year. 81,000 of those letters were sent just last week. We're one of only 2 states in the country whose state education agency is drumbeating in this way, using AP potential to determine what young people might be successful on AP courses. Now, we know that there are young people whose PSAT scores may not indicate likelihood of success in AP courses. We know this is not a fail-safe, but we also know that that AP advisement being what it is, this may help get some of our young people considered for AP. We hear from young people, we hear from their parents. This letter changed the direction of our thinking about our child's education. We began to explore AP. We began to enroll in AP. Our young people started to do well in school. They were challenged. They were excited about the rigor. And now they're on a different path in their education. Career and Technical Education Board, you heard last month that our career and technical education participation is up over pre-pandemic numbers. It's up over the last 3 years by almost 9%, by 9,000 students, 25% of our children in CTE programming, higher than pre-pandemic, as is the raw number. And you can see big increases in the last 3 years in Latino students, in Black students, in Asian students, in students of 2 or more races. Every single ethnic group, save Native Hawaiian, is up in terms of CTE participation. You can see that we're up in these categories as well: students with disabilities, economically disadvantaged students, English learner students, all up, and the latter 2 categories up by double digits. More than 7,000 economically disadvantaged students in CTE programs, more than 1,000 additional English learners in CTE programs. But it's not just CTE participants, it's also CTE completers, Board, because just as there are stray courses that young people can take in CTE, there are full programs that they can take and complete. Think the difference between a dual enrollment course and an early middle college program, a CTE class versus a full CTE program. Here you notice that the number of CTE completers in the last 3 years through the pandemic is up 8,400 students, 19% increase. Number of CTE completers is higher not simply than the nadir of the pandemic, it's higher than any other year pre-pandemic as well. Again, a tribute to the work that students and staff are doing in local school districts and intermediate school districts across the state. And you can see those increases, Board, are not related to any specific ethnic group. They're really largely across the board increases. In fact, there are increases in every ethnic group, and there are double-digit increases in all but one ethnic group up there on the page, with really healthy increases in students of 2 or more races, Latino students, Black students, and Asian students. Students with disabilities have begun to complete CTE programming at greater rates as well, a 17% increase in students with disabilities, a 31% increase in economically disadvantaged students completing CTE programming, and a 29% increase for English learners completing a full CTE program. So what's going on at the state level? We are engaged in a review process of CTE programming. You can see the status there, 400 post-secondary recognized credentials identified. In other words, children in high school are earning post-secondary credentials, work credentials, as they work through their high school careers at 14 to 18 years old. We also point out, however, that we have gaps in the state. We mentioned this last month, we mentioned it this month. We're going to continue to drumbeat around this. We need to do better and more in CTE. As we have improved and expanded our CTE work in the state, it has become increasingly obvious through our study of this area that we have CTE deserts, we have opportunity gaps. We will be doing a workshop on opportunity gaps in January of 2025. We have a budget ask in for fiscal year 26 around CTE. We're going to be drumbeating around this. We think that CTE can be a trajectory changer for our young people. What I mean by that is that a child who's in early middle college was headed toward college anyway. Same is not necessarily true for a child in CTE. That child may have been planning on going to college from his or her youngest days, and he or she may be turned on toward the notion of post-secondary education, graduating from high school, going to college, and completing college by a CTE program. Well, we're going to take the next three together, dual enrollment, early middle college, and international baccalaureate. And on this slide, what you can see is increases in each of these three areas. Look at the increase in dual enrollment over the last 2 years. 5,600 student increase in dual enrollment, 19% increase in dual enrollment. Dual enrollment is having a foot in two doors. It's being a high school student and a college student a la fois at the same time, all right? And that's what a lot of our kids are doing. 35,000 of them are in high school and college together. Think about that, and think about how powerful that is. Think about how powerful it is that not only have we eclipsed the pre-pandemic number, we've blown through the pre-pandemic number. And again, a tribute to the students and staff in Michigan's public schools. Early middle college numbers, a big increase over the last 7 years or 8 years. This was a program that our former governor, Governor Snyder, leaned into, and you can see an increase in excess of 90% over the last 8 years. In the last 2 years, an increase of 6%. And then the IB program, it's more of a niche program, high rigor. Only certain schools in the state have invested in international baccalaureate. But even there, you can see an increase from the nadir, no Ralph intended, of the pandemic. Here you can see a slide that looks at longitudinally from 15-16 to 23-24, the 5 rigorous Goal 4 programs that I just mentioned. And what you can see is that the total number of opportunities in 15-16 for our young people was 226,000. That increased to 253,000, almost 254,000 in 23-24. I speak to opportunities because this is a duplicated count. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that you can be a CTE student and a student who takes an AP class. You can take an AP class and also be dual enrolled at the local community college or the local university. So this is not a count of students, it's a count of opportunities, if you will. The band below, the row below the total number of opportunities is the total number of high school students. You can see that it has declined over the last several years. We're losing about 10,000 students a year on average in the state over the last several years. And then you can see that bottom row. For every 1,000 students, the number of program participants. This row bears explanation. You've gone from 460 opportunities in 15-16 to 570 of those opportunities for every 1,000 students in 23-24. That basically means that children have almost 25% more opportunities to deal with this level of rigor than they did 8 years ago. And again, a tribute to our students, a tribute to our staff, which have raised their game and helped young people raise their education as well. Special education transition services are for students with disabilities, 18 to 26 years old, who have a plan for post-high school. And you can see the percent of youth who have an IEP that meet the standards in the top chart. And then in the bottom chart, our state-determined standard of what is reasonable here, and then the percent of students meeting that standard below. So in summary, and because this is such a large presentation board, we will summarize after each goal. Increase student participation in all 5 of the rigorous Goal 4 secondary/post-secondary program areas: CTE, AP, IB, dual enrollment, and early middle college. A 12% increase in students participating in AP classes, a 30% increase in the number of students taking AP exams over the past 2 years, a 37% increase in students scoring a 3, 4, or a 5, and substantially more students of color taking AP exams and scoring a 3, 4, or 5. The 19% increase in the number of CTE completers over the past 3 years. We've increased these numbers largely, not predominantly, but largely by increasing the numbers and the percentages of young people in historically underrepresented populations. Goal 3 of the top 10 strategic education plan is the improvement of health, safety, and wellness of all learners. And here, board, you can see the success measures that in many ways you helped to develop 4 years ago when you approved this top 10 strategic education plan in an August 2020 vote. So let's begin with food. Food for thought and food for the body. Breakfast participation increased by 26% last year over the preceding year, a function of the Michigan School Meals Program. Lunches increased 20% last year over the preceding year, again, a function of the Michigan School Meals Program. Financial support in the budget from the state legislature, big advocacy by Governor Gretchen Whitmer for this. She signed this into law when the legislature approved this in the fiscal year 24 budget. We auditioned in a fashion for the Michigan School Meals Program, Dr. Golzinski, when we had the pandemic, because that pandemic showed us the power of serving all children meals. Attendance and chronic absenteeism. Board, you know that attendance has improved the last 2 years, 2 percentage point increase in attendance, and yet we continue to have to work on this area. We are not back to pre-pandemic levels. And similarly, chronic absenteeism has improved in the last 2 years, but we are not back to pre-pandemic levels. Our improvement in the 22-23 school year in chronic absenteeism was the greatest improvement in the country, and yet we have miles to go before we sleep on this issue. I was pleased to meet with ISD superintendents a few weeks ago in this room in an ISD Superintendent Advisory Council that we have formed. They are locked in on this issue of attendance and chronic absenteeism, working hard with their local school districts and their local school educators. The number of students who receive school mental health services through Section 31N funding has quadrupled in the last 4 years. It's an extraordinary number, and that is solely associated with Section 31N funding, which I'll discuss a little bit later in this presentation. You know, board, that we use a number of different surveys to help us determine how our children are doing. We know that there are limits to these surveys, but we also know that there are tremendous limits associated with having no survey data at all. So here, the percentage of children ages 0 to 17 years who were ever told by a doctor that they had asthma, percentage of children ages 0 to 17 years old who currently have asthma. You can see that those numbers dipped during the pandemic and began to re-rise as we came out of the pandemic. What's that a function of? It could be a function of two things. It could be a function of the reporting during the pandemic, which might have diminished to some degree. It could also be a function of the underlying phenomenon that's being focused on. You will notice the same theme in other data sets as we progress through this goal area. Take, for example, the percentage of children tested for lead. You'll notice that that dipped during the pandemic, and it began to re-rise as we moved out of the pandemic. Again, is that a function of the underlying phenomenon or a function of the reporting? It's impossible to know, but it does bear reflection. Similarly, percentage of students who are physically active and the percentage of students who used either tobacco products or vaping products. You'll notice that with respect to physical activity, we saw increases coming out of the pandemic. We didn't see decreases during the pandemic, at least not reported decreases during the pandemic, but we saw increases coming out of the pandemic. What we saw with tobacco and vaping use was an increase coming out of the pandemic, not up to pre-pandemic levels. Whether or not that's a function of the reporting or a function of the underlying phenomenon, it is not clear from these data sets. The percentage of students who have been bullied on school property in the past 12 months, I would say that irrespective of which of these numbers you take, these numbers are concerning. And I'm going to speak to this a little bit more in my remarks of the superintendent this afternoon. But you can see 23% of the young people reported that they had been bullied at least once in the past 12 months. I point these statistics out for a couple of reasons. One, we had a commitment to you, board, when you created with the staff of the department, with input from across the state, with input from more than 10,000 people across the state, you wanted us to focus to some degree on children's mental health, and we thought that there was a value to that as well. Look at the percentage of young people who felt sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row during the past 12 months. I can tell you that these numbers across the country are far higher than any of us would like to see. And then the percentage of students who seriously considered attempting suicide during the past 12 months, again, high across the country. This shows that we have children's mental health challenges that we have to address, not simply in the state, but across the country. These numbers are substantial. I heard a colleague of mine, state chief in another state, who really focused on this in a major way in a recent address that she gave. This should give us all pause. And if you've worked in a local school district, as I have for the vast majority of my career, you know that children's mental health can be very tenuous as a function of so many different things that they experience as they're buffeted in life. Michigan's national rank for overall child well-being is measured in an index by the Annie E. Casey Foundation. It's based on 4 factors: economic well-being, education, health, and family and community. These data are important. They're also limited data, and they are often dated data. But nonetheless, you can see the rank there for the last 9 years. Children's mental health. So in fiscal year 18 and before, Dr. Pritchett, back in the day when we were local educators and then when you were an ISD educator, There was no money for children's mental health, precisely nothing for children's mental health and school safety in the state. Fiscal year 19, we got $31 million. That seems like a lot of money, Ms. Carter. $20 per kid seems like very little money, Ms. Hans Connect, but the reality is that those are the same. $31 million back in fiscal year 19 was in fact $20 per child, and it wasn't a whole lot. But we were glad to get our foot in the door in fiscal year 19. And we've been pleased in the last several years to continue to grow those funds, and I'll share with you a snippet of what they've helped by in terms of support for our students and staff in a moment. Part of that funding for school mental health goes to ISDs for Section 31N funding. That funds school social workers at the ISD level to push in to local school districts to support local children. That money is recurring, it's important, and it has helped us enormously in the last half decade. The funding overall, Section 31N, OP, Section 31AA, has helped us add 1,700 helping professionals in the last 5 years. By helping professionals, I mean counselors, nurses, social workers, and school psychologists. This is a big deal. It's very, very hard to get it done in local public school districts when children are dealing with trauma actively in school, when they are challenged, and when those challenges visit themselves not simply on them, but on entire classes, entire wings of schools. And these helping professionals, while insufficient, are tremendously valuable to do what they've done in the last several years to provide support for our young people and by extension support for our educators as they teach in classrooms. I've talked with many superintendents, many principals who have indicated if there were more helping professionals on the market, they would hire them. They've just not been able to find more helping professionals. Nonetheless, this is a huge increase and of tremendous value for our staff and by extension, our students in public schools across the states. Almost $12 million more in the fiscal year 25 budget for hearing, vision, and dental screenings. And board, you fought for this. This was the funding that you stood up for. This was the funding that you voted for in a resolution to urge the state legislature and the governor to do a supplemental and restore a portion of that children's mental health and school safety funding. They restored $1/8 billion, $125 million. It is non-recurring, I understand that, but I also understand that this will be tremendously helpful this year, and we fight on for recurring funding in Section 31AA, as we have recurring funding in Section 31N in the coming fiscal years. And I would be remiss if I did not mention BHWorks. BHWorks is software, and that software board helps us to better support and provide services for our young people. It helps us better refer young people to outside providers. It helps us better communicate with one another. It helps us better record keep. 41 of 56 ISDs involved, 2 more coming on live in 24-25. Increasingly, we are managing the mental health support and care of our young people in a far more professional fashion. And then the summary on goal 3, 26% increase in breakfast, 20% increase in lunches. We've gone from nothing in the State School Aid Act for children's mental health and school safety in fiscal year 18 to more than $250 million for the same purposes in fiscal year 25, an increase of 1,700 helping professionals, and student attendance and chronic absenteeism both improved over the last 2 years with room for improvement moving forward. And now, board, I'm going to turn it over to my co-pilot, Chief Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Susie Carnell.
Good morning, State Board of Education members. We're going to move to Goal 5, increase the percentage of all students who graduate from high school. The measure for this goal is graduation rates. This slide shows the rising graduation rates of 4, 5, and 6-year cohorts over the last decade. You will notice the increases for each graduation year. For this slide, rising 4, 5, and 6-year graduation rate shows increase over the last 5 years. And the graduation rates over the last year show increases in year 4 and 5. The following set of slides provide a breakdown of 4, 5, and 6-year graduation rates by ethnicity. This slide shows the data for our Asian students with an increase in each graduation year over the past 10 years. For our Black and African American students, you will see big increases over the last 10 years. For our Hispanic and Latino students, you will see big increases over the last 10 years. Increases over the past decade for Native American and Alaska Native students. This slide shows increases over the past decade for graduation rate for Native, Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander students at the 4, 5, and 6-year markers. This slide highlights the increases in graduation rate in 4 years for students who identify with 2 or more races. Here you can see the increase in graduation rates over the past 10 years for white students. And while there's increases in the 1-year and 10-year column, this slide highlights the increase in graduation rate in 4 years for female and males. The highlight of this slide is the increase in graduation rate in 4 years for our English learners. Here you can see a significant increase in 4-year graduation rates for students who identified as economically disadvantaged. The highlight of this slide is the increase of graduation rate for our students with disabilities within 4 years. This slide is a summary of the graduation rate. 13 out of 17 categories of students had 4-year graduation rates in 2023 that were higher than in 2019 pre-pandemic, as identified by the asterisks. So what are the efforts of the department and districts to improve graduation rates? One way is through the use of personal curriculums. Students may modify the Michigan Merit Curriculum credit requirement to individualize the rigor and relevance of state graduation requirements. The chart on the right shows the increase in the number of students using personal curriculum since 2016-17 school year. Nearly 3 years ago, the Office of Educational Support, in partnership with the former American Institute for Research technical assistant consultant and staff of the Michigan Multi-Tier System of Support, that's a mouthful, collaborated to implement EWIMS. EWIMS stands for Early Warning, Intervention, and Monitoring System. This is a district-level systematic research, evidence-based approach to help students stay on track to graduate. Career and technical education, which Dr. Rice talked about earlier in Goal 4, is another effort used by districts and supported by the department to help increase graduation rate. CTE programs help make learning relevant for some students, help students explore their interests, and help to prepare them for well-paying jobs. MDE issued guidance for middle and high school students to help increase the graduation rate of their students. Another effort is the Community in Schools program. Districts that implement the CIS program find success in supporting students and their families with resources to help with high school graduation. This slide shows the 14 Michigan schools or districts that have received funding to implement the Community in Schools program. Another effort shown on this slide is a resource that helps students and adults explore careers and learn how to plan for a career. Districts must make this information available to all students in grades 8 through 12, and it can be found on the Department of Labor and Economic Growth website through the Pathfinders program. So in summary, for Goal 5, we've seen statewide graduation rates rise 10 out of the last 12 years. 17 of 17 categories increased in 2023 over 2022. 13 of 17 categories were higher in 2023 than pandemic. The efforts to help increase graduation rates include personal curriculum or the use of personal curriculum, the EWIMS program, CTE, and the guidance that the department shared with the field to increase high school and middle school graduation rates, also looking at middle schools. The next slide, or the next goal, is to improve early literacy achievement. We are presenting you with 3 measures as part of the State Strategic Education Plan. The result of the 3rd grade ELA assessment from the Michigan Student Test of Educational Progress, the result of a sample of 4th graders on the National Assessment of Education Program, also known as NAEP, and the results of a sample of 8th graders on the NAEP. This is a snapshot of the percent proficient for students in grade 3 in ELA on MSTEP. We do not have data to share for 2020 because states, including Michigan, received a federal waiver for this assessment. This is a snapshot of the reading data for a sample of 4th graders on the NAEP. For this slide may look familiar to you as it was part of the presentation last month, and it's the same slide as last year's All Goals presentation. These data are over 2.5 years old, and we anticipate new data in the winter of 2025. Here is a snapshot of the reading proficiency of a sample of 8th graders on the NAEP. Now let's look at the efforts to help improve literacy. First, in this fiscal year, there are 2 sections of law to help improve early literacy outcomes that we want to highlight here. First is Section 35M. It has $87 million allotted to it, and it requires the department to establish a literacy committee for literacy achievement. This committee will evaluate early literacy series and materials, will evaluate literacy professional development and other literacy tools, and then it will provide a ranking of these areas. The literacy team will present more on this section and other related laws later this afternoon. The second session is 35M. There is $10 million for completion on innovative literacy practices. The READ Innovation Competition will provide startup funds to eligible districts to develop and deploy innovative literacy initiatives that help make a positive impact on student literacy rates. So, in order to improve literacy, it is important that educators understand how students learn to read. This Scarborough's rope illustrates the chords needed to help a child become a skilled reader. Chords from language comprehension, which you see in the red, which includes background knowledge and vocabulary, and chords from word recognition in the blue, which contains phonological awareness and decoding, are braided together to build this rope. The chords in this rope are addressed in letters training volumes 1 and 2, and there will be more to come on this afternoon from the literacy team. This slide shows the number of educators who have been trained in letters and who are actively engaged in the training. Now, there's only $10 million in this section, but our goal is to train all K through 3 teachers, so we have some work to do in this area. 2 other significant laws that were recently passed is PA 146 and 147. These laws will help improve literacy in the state of Michigan. The department and the State Board of Education champion this law. This law ensures pre-service and in-service training to educators to learn and strengthen skills needed to identify and intervene with students who display the characteristics of dyslexia. So the previous slide showed the purpose of the law. This slide shows the department's responsibility for implementation of the law. It includes providing a coaching model, updating a list of assessments, publishing a list of evidence-based Tier 1, reading curriculum and material, and developing and providing technical assistance to our districts. The district's responsibility for PA 146, which begin in 2027-2028 school year, is selecting assessments, providing assurance that the literacy coaches receive professional development in instructional strategies, and to use assessment and instructional practices. Prior to the passage of the law on literacy and dyslexia, the department issued guidance to the field entitled Michigan Dyslexia Handbook, a guide to accelerating learner outcomes in literacy. In this handbook, it provided best practices to prevent reading difficulties, and it provided assessment practices. Section 35A, subdivision 4, allocates $42 million for ISD literacy coaches. Funding for literacy coaches began in fiscal year 2016 with $1 million allotment. Due to the substantial funding increases over the past year, there has been nearly a tripling of ISD coaches. Literacy coaches who are funded through 35A subsection 4 must receive or are in the process of receiving LETRS training. Michigan competed against other states and was awarded the Federal Comprehensive State Development Grant, which provides $16 million over 5 years to advance literacy skills for students. MDE worked with 5 districts to create and implement a comprehensive literacy plan. These plans include, but are not limited to, building diverse classroom libraries, ensuring professional development in LETRS training, and increasing family and community engagement. So I talked about how kids learn to read. Now let's address our efforts to engage students to improve their reading skills and their overall learning. We know from research that kids become active readers, which Ariana pointed out this morning, when they see themselves in their reading, they see others in their reading, they learn about other places, and they learn about other worlds. Building a diverse classroom library helps to provide students with an opportunity to do all of those things, see themselves in their reading, see others in their reading, visit other places and worlds. The department issued this guidance document to help students build diverse classroom libraries. To help educators understand the importance of diversity in literature, the department hosted its 2nd annual Literacy Symposium. We had over 600 participants. This was done in conjunction with Michigan's Multi-Tier System of Support Technical Assistance Center. The Teaching Comprehensive History effort is a vision of our state superintendent, Dr. Michael Rice. This initiative provides webinars on historic movements, events, and people to improve educators' understanding of the rich, diverse history of our country and world. To date, there's been 33 webinars with 15 topics, and some of these topics are displayed here: women's anti-slavery activism and the Bracero Project. So in summary, our efforts to improve literacy include literacy and dyslexia legislation recently passed, Letters training, you can see here that we've had almost 2,700 teachers or educators complete training. 7,500 are actively engaged in the training. And so far today, we have 625 that are enrolled in cohort 9. The application for cohort 9 has not closed, so we anticipate seeing that number rise. We have diverse classroom libraries that are increasing across the state, and we have provided diversity in literature conference, and we provide educators with teaching comprehensive history webinars.
Thank you, Dr. Carnell. Board, Goal 7 of the Top 10 Strategic Education Plan is an increase in the numbers of certified teachers in areas of shortage. We look at, as you know, both quantity and quality, yes, but also diversity as well. These are some of the success measures that we look at when we approach Goal 7, although we feathered out to greater numbers of success measures over a period of years as we better understand this work. In 2011, Board, the state legislature cut $470 per child from the per pupil foundation allowance, required a 20% plus health insurance contribution for every person in public schools. It created a less generous pension tier for incoming teachers. Cuts ensued across the state, 6 million in my local school district, more than $1 billion across the state. Programs cut, staffing cut, class sizes increased, and what happened to preparation for the teaching profession? Well, plummeted over the ensuing 5 years from 23,203 to 9,512 in 2016, 2017. But that's not the end of the story. That 59% increase over a 5-year period of time is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the story. It's the beginning of the rebuilding of public education. Every year, Ms. Kuzmano, since, we have increased the number of young people preparing for the profession. A 71% increase from 2016, 2017 to 22, 23, an increase from 9,512 to 16,260. Here you can see the increase year by year over a 4-year period of time in the number of initial teacher certificates. And here you can see the distribution of those initial teaching certificates by in-state versus out-of-state recipient. Board, over the last 8 years, we've increased the number of teachers who are permanently assigned and certified to teach the position from 84,000 to 90,000 over an 8-year period of time. Unhappily, however, the number of temporarily assigned teachers or not appropriately credentialed individuals has increased during that same period of time. Recently reduced in terms of the percentage, but still far higher than we would like. We would like this to be a very, very small portion of the staff members who are facing our young people every day and teaching our young people every day in our classrooms across the state. As I mentioned, Board, we're interested not simply in quantity and in quality, but we're also interested in teacher diversity. We've added 2,272 teachers of color to the workforce in the last 8 years, a 34% increase, an increase of 1,653 black teachers, an increase of 260 Hispanic teachers, an increase of 192 Asian teachers during that period of time, during that 8-year period of time. Here you can see those increases in ethnic diversity across that 8-year period of time. The increase in, for example, black teachers from 4,620 in 15-16 to 6,273 in 23-24. But Board, what this chart shows you is that though we've increased the number of teachers of color substantially off of a base of 6,600 in 15-16, a 34% increase, 2,272 person increase in an 8-year period of time. Because we have 90,000 FTEs, it takes a lot to bend a share, to change a share of that overall ethnic pie for the teacher distribution. So that 34% increase, that 2,272 FTE increase in teachers of color manifests itself as 2.5 percentage points from 8.2% of the teachers to 10.7% of the teachers. Board, you know it's not all about money, but that it's not all about money doesn't mean that it isn't at all about money. Mr. Centers, you and Dr. Garcia know it most assuredly is in part about money. In fiscal year 20 and before, we had precisely nothing in the State School Aid Act to address a teacher shortage that was rife in this state. In fiscal year 21 and 22, our lobbying efforts generated small sums of money. But in fiscal year 23, and in the ensuing fiscal years, we generated a range of funding from the state legislature supported by the governor and signed into law by Governor Whitmer. Many of these efforts initially recommended and or incubated in the department. $575 million in fiscal year 23, $448 million in fiscal year 24, $140 million this fiscal year. So what did the $575 million help us begin to do? Well, $305 million was for educator fellowships or scholarships. $175 million, Ms. Lipton, was for Grow Your Own programs for support staff and students. $50 million, Dr. Robinson, was for student teacher stipends, because we're not in a buyer's market anymore, we're in a seller's market. And in a seller's market, you have to incentivize, Dr. Pritchett, differently than you do in a buyer's market. And $10 million to help us recruit and hire CTE teachers. So what did the $448 million buy us, among other things, over a period of years? Well, $225 million, Dr. Harmala, goes for student loan repayment. $64 million, Dr. Chapman, helps us boost educator compensation. And then you can see additional sums for different categories, some of which were repeated from the preceding year, some of which are new in fiscal year 24. It bears mentioning, Ms. Gonzalez, about the mentoring and induction dollars. $50 million over 5 years, $10 million on average a year for 5 years. This is a big deal, because prior to fiscal year 24, prior to last year, we had precisely nothing in the State School Aid Act for mentoring and induction. We've advocated that this mentoring needs to be mandatory, number one, and it needs to be funded, number two. When I came into this position 5+ years ago, we had one mandatory mentoring that was required in the state, and it was for teachers. There was no mandatory mentoring required for counselors, for principals, for superintendents, no mandatory training for board members as well. And now we have mandatory mentoring in a number of categories, and we have funding to address mentoring and induction for a number of these categories, with a number of professions knocking on our door saying, hey, this is really good, this whole stuff about mentoring and induction. This is terrific. We'd like to be a part of this as well. We talk about mentoring and induction because the pipeline is not simply about recruitment, Ms. Chapman. It's also about retention. It's not simply about whether we can get you through a teacher prep program, through the MTTC, into a classroom, but whether you stay there, and whether you stay there with some degree of efficacy, whether you feel comfortable in space with kids, whether they feel comfortable with you, and more importantly, whether you're generating higher student achievement with them. $15 million in fiscal year 24 went to establish a rural educator credentialing hub. I'll mention this again in a moment. And then $140 million this fiscal year for these categories. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention Talent Together, a registered teacher apprenticeship partnership with the U.S. Department of Labor, all 56 ISDs involved, 384 LEAs, 19 ed prep programs. This is an important support staff to teacher route. This engages support staff members, many of whom have brilliant relationships with young people, in a new career path, a path into the classroom as teacher, not necessarily as paraprofessional or instructional aide, but as teacher. Talent Together received these funds from the state legislature in the fiscal year 23 supplemental passed at the same time as the fiscal year 24 budget. Note that the same elements are required as any other route to certification: completion of an ed prep program, and attainment of at least a BA, and passage of the MTTC. Talent Together has 1,100 candidates enrolled in the first two cohorts, 229 newly certified teachers, and Talent Together's pool is more diverse than our overall teacher pool. And what we find is with these grow your own efforts, we cast a wider net, not simply with Talent Together, but with some of the 27B grow your own programs as well. We cast a wider net, we recruit more widely, we inspire people more widely, we end up with a more diverse cohort of teachers as a result. So how are we doing on some of these programs? Well, the data is fledgling. It's not, we haven't been at it for 10 years. We don't have 10 years of data. But the early returns are good. With respect to the fellowships or scholarships, we've given out more than 3,400 in the first 2 years. With respect to student teacher stipends, 5,000 in the first 2 fiscal years of awards. With respect to student loan repayment, which began last year, $19 million awarded, 546 LEAs and ISDs participating, 9,500 eligible participants benefiting with financial support for their loans. What about mentoring and induction? Well, this has begun with a grant to Western Michigan University to help us on standards creation, an evaluation grant to the American Institutes for Research for an evaluation of this work, and ultimately the distribution of grant dollars to local school districts for the mentoring and induction work. Grow Your Own is ultimately where we are going to profoundly improve the profession. It's in Talent Together, which I mentioned earlier. It's in the 27B programming as well. $175 million awarded to date, 162 LEAs, PSAs, and ISDs awarded, more than 1,000 staff members having benefited to date. MDE budget helped with Grow Your Own for students to teachers, because there are 2 types of Grow Your Own programs: support staff to teachers and students to teachers. And I understand that the latter is a longer range effort, Ms. Doxey. I get that. But sometimes you plant seeds not for harvest tomorrow, but for harvest for a metaphorical tomorrow, for a longer term tomorrow. And you can see that those Grow Your Own programs in the latter of the 2 categories have already engaged more than 1,000 student participants. And board, you've seen some of them at the board table. We've brought those young people to you. Children from Holland, along with their teacher, children from Eastern High School and Lansing School District with their teacher, children in the Macomb Intermediate School District with their irascible but lovable intermediate school district superintendent and his ever-present chief academic officer. Board, we have a program which is a collaboration between MDE and now MyLeap. It's a CTE-funded program. It's called Future Proud Michigan Educator Launch. It is a registered teachership apprenticeship program in partnership with USDOL. It helps young people gain one of a number of youth-serving credentials. Not teacher credentials, but youth-serving credentials that you see at the bottom of that slide. Board, you may recall or not that during the pandemic, we began two programs, one called Welcome Back, Proud Michigan Educator, and one called Welcome Home, Proud Michigan Educator. The first was bringing teachers off the sidelines, people who were certified, who were living in the state, who weren't currently teaching. We helped them get recertified, got them back into classrooms, and similarly, Welcome Home, Proud Michigan Educator, in which we drumbeat with people out of state to bring them home. We sent in excess of 100,000 communications that first year. It generated some tremendous benefit. Props to the Office of Educator Excellence for their work on these two programs. But when you write 100,000 of your best friends, you often get some really quirky responses and some non-responses, because we found that, in fact, some of the letters found their way to people who had not only left the state years ago, but left this world years ago as well. Special Education Teacher Tuition Reimbursement Grant, you can see that our Office of Special Education has a means of providing some funding to help with the creation of special education certification endorsements. 227 teachers have benefited from this, 2,800 credits reimbursed in the last few years. The Rural Educator Credentialing Hub, to which I referred a few minutes ago, it's $15 million to Central Michigan University, but that's a little bit misleading, because you can see on the chart that this consortium to help would-be rural educators get over the hurdle of finishing their teacher prep programs, passing the MTCC, and becoming fully accredited teachers. You can see that that's not simply Central. It's also Northern Michigan University, it's Eastern Michigan University, it's Michigan State University, and it's Saginaw Valley State University. We appreciate that cohort. There are 100,000 square miles board in the state. There are 835 local school districts in the state. There are 56 ISDs in the state, and it takes a lot to serve them all. It's one thing to serve the Tri-County area. It's another thing to serve those ISDs that are in more sparsely populated corners of the state. We have national board certification grants. You can see their impact in this slide. You can see the impact of the MTTC reimbursements here. We've got a little bit of money to reimburse first-time MTTC test takers. And there's become growing interest in our work in this area. We've been recognized 5 times in the last 3 years relative to the work to address the teacher shortage. Michigan Department of Education has been recognized by US DOE twice in the last 6 months, once with an invitation to present at a regional convening, subsequently at a national convening last month, and then next month, a few of us will be in Arizona to present at the Council of Chief State School Officers on this issue. So in summary, Board, a 59% decrease in teacher preparation enrollment was replaced or offset in part by a 71% increase in the ensuing 6 years. 34% increase in teachers of color, big increases in funding from nothing in the State School Aid Act in fiscal year 20, more than $1 billion over the last 3 fiscal years. We are literally rebuilding a profession that some left for dead. And these new programs affect, as I've mentioned, not simply quantity and quality, but also diversity as well. Board Goal 8 of the Top 10 Strategic Education Plan is the provision of adequate and equitable school funding. And as I mentioned before, while it's not all about money, that doesn't mean that it isn't at all about money. Ms. Kuzmano, you know that your school, your high school, your school district doesn't run without money, nor do the other 3,300 schools, the other 834 school districts across the state. So how are we doing in terms of adequate and equitable school funding? Well, Board, you know that different children have different needs have different costs. You also know that there have been several school finance studies since 2015, the most substantial of which was a School Finance Research Collaborative study, which was released in January of 2018. It was a terrific study, more than 300 pages. It suggested that we were underfunding our base funding, number one, and number two, we were underfunding weights for particular children who had more complicated and more expensive needs for their education. I'm talking about students with disabilities, poor children, and English learners. School Finance Research Collaborative has updated its study twice, in miniature in June of 2021, in miniature in the fall of 2022. We continue to lag when it comes to School Finance Research Collaborative recommendations. We have made tremendous progress, nonetheless, in the last 3 fiscal years. Here's what's happened in terms of the target foundation allowance. You can see the increase from 2019 to 2022, quite spare. Big increases in 22 to 25. Board, note that while PSAs got the dotted line increase and traditional public school districts did not get a foundation allowance increase, they did get a revenue to offset 5.75 percentage points of the retirement contribution rate, which effectively reduced that retirement contribution rate for this fiscal year from 20.96% to 15.21%. Note also, Board, that that has been enshrined into law from fiscal year 26 on. Board, it's not simply about the base funding. It's about these groups of young people who have greater needs and whose education needs to be more greatly funded. So let's talk about economically disadvantaged children. There's a body of research that suggests that our poor children, on average, require more funding to get them to the same place. You can get them to the same place, you can get them far further, but you have to have more funds to make up for some of the challenges that they face outside of school. $83 million increase in Section 31A funding, 8.7% increase over a 1-year period of time. Over a 3-year period of time, Board, a doubling of Section 31A funding, from $500 million to a little bit over $1 billion. 3 things about this. First of all, a 100% increase off a $500 million number is significant in and of itself. But 3 additional elements that the board needs to be reminded of. 1, there's an opportunity index. In other words, for high concentrations of poverty, the Opportunity Index provides greater dollars for school districts. But there are 2 things that the department fought for, lobbied for during the fiscal year 25 budget debates, which were not high profile, but which we believe will be impactful for our young people. 1, dollars for teacher recruitment and retention. For districts that are among the highest poverty, 30% of those dollars that they receive of the 31A allocation can go for recruitment and retention efforts. That's number 1. Number 2, for school buildings that are among our highest poverty school buildings, up to 30%, again, of the district's 31A funding can be used to reduce the pupil-teacher ratio in grades K-3 in that school. Okay, so we're talking about a research-based strategy here, lower class sizes in high-poverty K-3 elementary schools, and trying to make sure that our children get off to a strong early literacy beginning, a strong early numeracy beginning. These increases in categorical funding course across major categorical programs. Not all categorical programs, but the major categorical programs. So for example, an increase this year of $10.4 million, 26% for English learners, Section 41 funding. Over a 3-year period of time, a $25 million increase, just shy of a doubling of funding for English learners in 3 years. For students with disabilities, This category for students with disabilities is very involved, but Section 51E, let's focus in just on Section 51E for students with disabilities, an $8.4 million increase, 1.7% increase, a 3-year increase of $400 million, a 3-year increase of 454%. That's a whopping increase. I'm not suggesting that we fully fund students with disabilities yet. I am suggesting that we have made tremendous strides with the lobbying efforts of local school districts, ISDs, the department itself, the state board, and others. A 1-year increase for students in rural and isolated districts of $706 million, a 6% increase. 3-year increase, $4 million, or 46%. Partnership district funding has been maintained. It's essentially $6 million in base funding, $12 million in additional funding on top of that base, $18 million to distribute per year over a 3-year period of time, 24, 25, and 26. Board, you know, because we've talked about this, that the reimbursement of general education school transportation is a matter of rural equity. We sometimes think of equity, fairness, as a function solely of urban school districts. But of course, equity, that's all it means, is fairness. It just means fairness. It doesn't mean a particular jurisdiction. It doesn't mean a particular geography. In this case, we're talking about rural equity or geographic equity. Our districts that are sparsely populated have larger per pupil costs for the transportation of their children. And all else being equal, if you spend more on the road, you spend less in a classroom. And that's what occurs across the state in our sparsely populated communities. We've advocated for this general education transportation reimbursement. We got $125 million in fiscal year 24, a like amount in fiscal year 25. This was funded with a designated fund a year ago that started with $350 million. We removed $125 million immediately, $125 million subsequently in fiscal year 25. This fiscal year, we're down to $100 million. This is an important area, and we ought not to walk back this category in fiscal year 26. Board, you know that for the first time in our state's history, we have some funding for school infrastructure and some funding for school consolidation as well, and a school consolidation and infrastructure fund. And the dollars specifically allocated for school infrastructure, you can see up on the board for fiscal year 25, $75 million for a measure of a competition, $35 million for the designations in the 2nd through 6th bullets on your screen. The School Finance Research Collaborative, as extraordinary a study as it was, had gaps, and it acknowledged the gaps. It said we have gaps in our study relative to higher concentrations of poverty, transportation costs, and capital costs. And it said we need to go back and restudy these areas or study additionally these areas. And in fact, you saw a restudy around transportation by SFRC. You saw the study that was produced in the fall of 22. It was that study that provided the support for our advocacy for general education transportation reimbursement in the fiscal year 24 budget debates. SFRC has also advocated for some capital dollars for districts that are poor and can't raise either bond money or sinking fund money. And SFRC, based on the encouragement of one former local school superintendent, advocated pretty strongly for higher concentrations of poverty receiving extra consideration in the budget as well. So in summary, board, fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 24 budgets, the best budgets in the state history post-Proposal A, and there's really nothing in second or third place, depending upon how you count. Fiscal year 23 budget was extraordinary. Fiscal year 24 was very, very substantial. And the fiscal year 25 budget is a more significant budget, Dr. Pritchett, than most that we've seen in the last 30 years. A lot of people didn't participate in conversations in the state about, well, we can make it if you just boost the $50 increase to a $75 increase per child. Well, we had a $450 per kid increase in fiscal year 23 in the foundation allowance, and a like amount in fiscal year 24. And while that fiscal year 25 amount was a lower increase, both in dollars and in percentage, and while the categorical increases were lower in fiscal year 25 than in 24 and in 23, as a 3-year period of time, post-Proposal A, these are the best. That said, we're making up for lost ground. We're making up in 3 regards. One, the lowest total revenue growth, inflation adjusted, in the country from 1995 to 2015, according to an MSU David Arson study from January 2019. So it's off a diminished revenue base, number one. 2, it's off a diminished staffing base as well. You saw the adverse impact of the cuts on the teacher preparation pipeline. And there's nothing more important, Ms. Kuzmano, than who's in front of children every single day. And then 3, the challenge of coming out of a pandemic. But as you can see from a number, not all, but from a number of the metrics that we've presented today, we've not only made strides, but we've eclipsed pre-pandemic numbers in a whole host of different ways.
So for those of you who looked on the slide several slides ago and saw goal 8 and said, oh, we're done. I'm sorry. We have 2 more goals. And I want to make sure that we address those 2 goals because they are important. So let's look at goal 1, expand early childhood opportunities, learning opportunities. There are 2 measures for goal 1, looking at the Great Start Readiness Program and looking at the National Institute for Early Education Research annual yearbook rating. We know that children participating in preschool programs we know that when children participate in preschool programs, it is important because it helps children develop skills and the foundation for learning, and it prepares them for success for school and beyond. So let's look at the Great Start Readiness Program. This slide shows the overall funding for GSRP. You can see the steady increase in funding, particularly over the last 4 years since fiscal year 2021. The funding for GSRP for this fiscal year, which began October 1, is just over $580 million. This amount is more than double the funding in fiscal year 21. This slide looks at the funding per child and is analogous to per pupil funding that Dr. Rice talked about earlier in grades K through 12. Here you will notice, again, the increases since 2021. There are 3 buckets of funding. 1, the expanded program, which is shown at the top in green, which is over $12,000 per child. This is a new program, and the department and the State Board of Education recommended this program to the legislature. 2, funding per child for the full day program is just over $10,000 per child. And 3, the funding for half day program is just over $5,000 per child. Now we look at the number of children who participated in GSRP Readiness Program, in Great Start Readiness Program. In 2024, just over 41,000 children enrolled in GSRP. After the numbers dipped during the pandemic, we see a significant rebound since 2021, which is higher than the pre-pandemic level. Now let's move from a state to a nation or national outlook. These data are from the National Institute of Early Education Research Annual Yearbook Rating. As you can see, we are number one, indicated by the star on the slide, and have remained number one in quality for the last several years. Michigan is tied with 5 other states as the top-ranked preschool program in the country in quality. As it relates to access, our rating is 18, which is up since 2020. And in 2022, we moved up to number 6 and remain number 6 in the nation for funding. So in summary of Goal 1, since 2010, the number of GSRP eligible students served has increased 108%, and over the last 3 years, there has been a 52% increase. In the near annual yearbook rating, Michigan remains number 1 in quality and is number 6 in funding. The last goal we are presenting to you is Goal 6. We will highlight some of the information you heard last month from Dr. Beverly Walker-Graffia and her team. We measure the progress for Goal 6 by looking at the percentage of Michigan adults ages 25 to 64 with a certificate or degree, which is a post-secondary credential. We know that improving specialized skills and knowledge to an adult enhances a person's employability and overall income. We are seeing steady increases in the percentage of adults with a certificate or degree. The latest data from the Lumina Foundation indicates that in 2022, over 51% of Michiganders ages 25 through 64 had a certificate or a degree. Here is a breakdown of the number of degrees and certificates since 2018, with the most current data available. This slide shows an increase in the number of adults obtaining a bachelor degree or a graduate or professional degree. Department's efforts are in 3 buckets: student opportunities, educator opportunities, and adult opportunities. This slide highlights student opportunities in advanced placement, dual enrollment, international baccalaureate, college-level examination program, early middle college, and traditional services. Most of these you've heard earlier from Dr. Rice in Goal 4. Additional student opportunities are through CTE programs. There are over 400 credentials available to students in 53 CTE programs and in 17 CTE clusters. Other department efforts include, for those who are interested in educator opportunity, is the Grow Your Own program and teacher apprenticeship programs, which Dr. Rice talked about earlier. And for adults who are not specifically focused on education, there are the Michigan Reconnect program, Pathfinder program, and Going Pro in Michigan program. In summary, the state is making progress toward the governor's goal of achieving 60% of adults ages 25 through 64 with a post-secondary credential by the year 2023. This is evident by more than half of Michigan adults obtaining a certificate or degree. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Rice.
Well, we have a little bit more time on that 60 by 30 goal. We have until 2030 for that. Board, big wins in all goal areas. Increases in CTE, AP, IB, dual enrollment in early middle college. Increases that in many cases eclipse pre-pandemic numbers. Significant increases in the number of students participating in AP, taking exams, and getting scores which often, not always, but often qualify for college credit. 26% increase in breakfast, 20% increase in lunches, 1,700 additional helping professionals over the last 5 years, rising graduation rates, not simply in a single category, but in all categories in 2023, and 13 of those 17 categories higher than pre-pandemic. Relative to early literacy, a huge win. Literacy dyslexia legislation, 2 bills, now law, PA 146 and PA 147, These will profoundly change the way we educate our young people in terms of early literacy. 2,600, almost 2,700 educators having completed letters training, 7,500 engaged in this 18 to 24 month enormously consuming professional development. This is not a mandate in the state, but we would like to see it be a mandate for early educators. Big increases in people preparing for the teacher profession, and those big increases include significant increases in teachers of color. Funding in the state has improved, but we are digging out from a very, very, very bad funding period. And you cannot make up in 2 years what you created over in excess of 2 decades in the state. That's not the math of school finance. I want to thank the creative and hardworking educators and support staff across the state. I want to thank MDE staff, small in number, mighty in battle, not simply those in the room, those on my wings, those behind me, but also the hundreds of staff members who are not in the room today. I want to thank the state board, state legislators, and legislative staff who do tremendous work and often don't get a whole lot of credit for that work, and our governor for their partnership and leadership. And board, we stand ready for your questions. Please.
Great job. I don't know if it's more just observation. So I went to the NASB conference, and so as you look at the agenda, those are the things that everybody's working on. And so it's obvious that everybody has a shortage of teachers and principals. So every state that was there in attendance is working on some type of idea or some type of program where they're trying to increase the principal pipeline, increase the teacher pipeline. And, you know, I mean, we just have a human capital issue, period. But everybody's pulling from the same tree other than grow your own, you know. So everybody's recruiting globally for teachers right now. But then what you said is going to take a little longer time with growing the students in the teaching profession. So it was just observation of that. Something else that everybody was talking about is how to manipulate, or I don't know if I want to use that word, how to modify making licensure easier in some states. And then I know what that issue becomes. We want quality over quantity, quantity over quality? There were some other things. I mean, everybody talked about literacy and AI, artificial intelligence. Chronic absenteeism was really big in every state, but I think they miss, I got to speak out about it, but they miss some of the social economic issues versus, you know, you just miss too many days, or is it handicap, is it literacy? Some of these things have a social economic disparity impact that I don't think that every state doesn't have as diverse a population. So I get that. And then the last thing I think they talked about, I don't know if we've ever discussed it here, is adding students to their state board or local boards. And so you going through these, I felt like I was at the conference, but I feel good about us right now.
That's a good thing. I appreciate that. And you know, given the fact that we've got a student advisory council of 55 students, we've got a lot of opportunity for a student at the table. Thank you very much for sharing that, Senator. Appreciate it. Who's next? Ms. Lipton.
So that was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
And brief too.
I think that sometimes, you know, when you're doing this work for as long a time as many of us have been, it's very easy to, you know, feel like you're swimming upstream. But I do think it's important to take note and reflect on positive trend lines, and also areas where we can basically say, yes, we are, we've gotten it right. And I think you highlighted those areas where we're seeing movement, positive movement in the right direction, positive policies, and also areas where we do need to keep working, because this is not a static. Education has never been a static policy, and we're always working. So I'm just going to just sort of go through. I didn't realize until the end that I could actually click on the slide to see what page it was, so I apologize, because I didn't do that through, but I'll just talk about the general topics. So in terms of the data regarding chronic absenteeism, I do agree that it's something that people are talking about. I do think that the pandemic did have a huge impact on the way that families and children view attendance, school attendance. And I think that we're sort of still, that's still evolving. But I do want to just uplift the remarks you made about the community in-school grants that the department and the partnerships, Community In-School, CIS, Michigan, is working on with districts. And I would also like to broaden that out to research from states that have embraced a community schools model, not community in schools, but full service community schools based on the FSCS grant that the U.S. Department of Education has been giving now for, I think, perhaps the past 5 or 6 years. I know Michigan has not received any of those full service community school grant dollars because they seem to be focusing on states that have more of a statewide model. But I do think that the research showing how absenteeism is directly affected and reduced by those schools that have embraced a full service community school model is really pretty amazing. And I do think that it's something that we should continue to look at. Even though I know that CIS is using just a partial full service community school model, I get that. But I do think it would be interesting to look at that data because I think it's going to be pretty transformative in dealing with chronic absenteeism. Okay. Now in terms of specific questions, on one of the slides, I just noted down that the department has 14 EWIMS trainer coaches, which I think is phenomenal. I guess I want to ask a more aspirational question because I do think that that's a really, really great model. If you had a magic wand and money wasn't an object, my gut tells me that 14 is a great start, but it's not enough. But if we could all wave our magic wands, what does MDE need?
Can I ask you a question? Is this an EWIMS magic wand, or does this magic wand have all sorts of powers?
I'm going to start just with EWIMS because I've often dreamed about having a global magic wand for education, but I just want to say, in terms of the 14 EWIMS trainer coaches, my question was, my gut tells me that that's not enough. And if you had your druthers, what would that cohort look like if money wasn't an object?
I agree. The 14 coaches that we have are not enough. I don't know what that number would look like, but the goal would be to have EWIMS implemented in every high school in the state.
Okay.
And so that would be the
Okay.
goal. Even with the 14, even if we thought about an EWIMS consultant at each of the ISDs, we still wouldn't have enough 56 ISDs. So it would be over 14.
Right. That was sort of my thinking that, and we're not even talking about doubling or tripling. We're talking about
Would a quadruple would get one in every ISD.
ISD.
But every
right?
ISD is not created equal.
Yeah, no, right, no, that's not even, but thank you for that observation. Okay, let's see, these are just some other notes that I had. Just in terms of the, Section 12C funding regarding the school consolidation and infrastructure. I think it's something that even when I was in the legislature, people were talking about, oh, there's too many school districts and getting school districts to consolidate is really, really, really hard. So I think it's interesting that it's being funded. I have a two-part question. My first question is, have any school districts applied for that money?
So the answer is yes. We've done one round of awards already. We are about to do a second round of awards.
Okay,
$125 million in total for these Section 12C grants. I will tell you that the flexibility of the grants is useful. The consolidations that perhaps you're thinking of are not necessarily the consolidations that others are thinking of. They're thinking of, for example, consolidation of services often. There's some consolidation of schools and school districts and programs and, but oftentimes you're thinking about consolidation of service provision. And all of those are possible under the statute. I can tell you that if you are going to incentivize the reduction of the number of local school districts in the state, and we do have too many local school districts, there's no doubt about that, but how to get from where we are to a more logical number is hard to determine, one. Two, what may seem logical to us at a state board meeting in Lansing doesn't prove to be so logical when you go to the Western UP or the Eastern UP or the Northern Lower or the Thumb, where kids are sparsely populated and you've got these pretty rich traditions of local education. So I'm not saying that we have the proper number. We would do well to have fewer districts in the state, and there are many states, most states, have fewer districts than we do, and certainly on a per capita basis. But it's one thing to talk about in theory. It's another thing, as you point out, to go from here to there. There are a lot of legal challenges. There are cultural challenges as well. But take a state, for example, like Maryland. Maryland has 24 school districts for two-thirds the population that we have. They have 23 county school districts. They have Baltimore City. There are 24 school districts. We have 835 LEAs, not including the 56 intermediate school districts. The state superintendent in Maryland can meet with the 24 school superintendents in the state of Maryland in this room. We would have trouble fitting 835 people into this room.
right. It's and I'm not sure that simply putting more money into that fund is necessarily going to yield different results. But it's interesting, and it'll be interesting to sort of monitor how those studies come along. You did mention David Arson in some of your remarks, and he, I think, very, very interestingly points out that we're one of the few states that doesn't really have a consistent funding source for our infrastructure, which is something that I didn't really understand until I had the opportunity to sort of discuss that with him. Most states have a very robust infrastructure fund, which I I think he said we're maybe one of a couple of states that don't have that. And that does create an equity challenge in and of itself, since as we heard from our first presenters, that the way you construct a space really does have a significant educational outcome, irrespective of the curriculum and all of these other things, on the value of the education that the student is getting. And because we don't have, I don't think, a very equitable way of allowing our districts to do that infrastructure, and it's oftentimes based on the tax base of the housing in the community. I do think we're going to have some persistent inequities just baked into our system until we can really get a handle on a better way of funding infrastructure improvements in our buildings. So anyway, thank you.
Well, to the issue, I do want to speak, if I could, do infrastructure. If you do not have a bond or a sinking fund from which to draw for capital needs, those capital needs, one of two things is happening. Either those capital needs are being funded from your operating budget. So, as I mentioned, if you're spending it on the road, you're not spending it in classrooms. Well, if you're spending it on infrastructure, you're not spending it on classrooms. If that's what's happening to your general fund operating budget, all else being equal, your kids are adversely affected. So that's one thing. The second possibility is that the element to which you are referring, the capital element, whatever that may be, is foregone, either temporarily or permanently. You may hold off on replacing a roof, which you may think of as frugality, until the roof caves in, and all of a sudden you've adversely affected everything underneath that roof. So certain things don't get funded, technology improvements, for example. Certain things don't get done, a new wing to a school when you have burgeoning enrollment, a replacement of an old facility, a replacement of an aging boiler, the addition of a chiller, because you've never had a chiller in that 1924 building. It was not an HVAC building, it was an HV building. So some things are foregone temporarily or permanently, and some things are paid for, but they're paid for out of the operating budget at the expense of the classroom. So I share that because it's absolutely a measure of equity. And these communities that can't afford a millage, or that can afford a millage, but can't afford the same level of millage. And I'm not talking about an extraordinary millage, but one that addresses basic needs. A boiler, a chiller, a ceiling tile, flooring tile. This is not an unreasonable sort of thing. That really needs to be for 835 districts across the state without exception. That's really important. And then the only other thing that I might add is about consolidation. We have a lot of very small districts. They are by themselves diseconomies of scale. That is to say, they struggle to operate by themselves, except at a premium, except at a higher cost on a per pupil basis. What reduces those diseconomies of scale, and to some extent makes them economies of scale, are our intermediate school districts. They're literally what separate diseconomies of scale from economies of scale by handling a lot of the back office functions, the payroll, the accounting, the purchasing, the budgeting, in some cases the professional development or the curriculum development. So a lot of people point to that local school district and say, well, that's inefficient. It is inefficient. It's the only district, kind of in that 50-mile radius. So it's inefficient, but there are not a whole lot of kids living in that corner of the state. But what makes that district as efficient as it can be? Well, it's that ISD. And that ISD providing support. You can't go out on the open market easily and buy a 1 day a week payroll clerk. or a 2-day-a-week accounting clerk. Where do you get that from? Well, you get it from your ISD because the ISD aggregates those services and goes out and purchases X number of payroll clerks, Y number of accounting clerks, and so on and so forth, and distributes those as those local districts need them. So the system, but for ISDs, would be tremendously inefficient. It is markedly made more efficient by ISDs. Now, I would never advocate for 835 districts with 1.4 million public school children in the state. But the way we make it work on a daily basis in the state is through those services of ISDs. So anyway, I just share that. I thought it bore mentioning. Thank you very much, Ms. Lipton. Other questions or comments, reflections? Once, twice, thrice? Yes, ma'am, Dr. Pritchett.
Thank you. I've really only got one question, so I'll lead with that and then some comments. The GSRP ranking was from 2023. Do we know when 2024 will be released or whatever it is, published?
So those are typically released in the spring. Okay?
Right.
And I believe they lag a year.
Okay.
You know, a lot of the data that we have in public education, particularly when it's amassed at a national level, is dated data.
Sure.
Right. And so I believe NEAR releases its data every spring, and I believe it is a single year lag.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
We do have a presentation from MyLeap next month on Goal 1, on GSRP expansion, and we look forward to hearing more from MyLeap at that time about where things are relative to GSRP.
Okay. All right. The first part of the presentation dealing with high school, and it's probably because I lived part of my educational career in high school. Kudos, first of all, to sending those letters to students and their parents saying to them, hey, you've got a good possibility of being successful in an AP class, because the general environment in a high school is, oh, well, I can't do AP. That tends to be what most kids start out with. And I'm beginning to see, in my limited view of high schools now, that beginning to change, where it's almost getting to the point of, yeah, I'm going to do that. Maybe they won't take the test, and that's okay. And I think that's the other thing that's happened, is that kudos to high school administrators and staff who have said, come and take this class for 8 months. Let's do this rigor. And if you take the test, that's great. But if you feel as though at the end of that journey you're not ready to take the test, that's okay too. But we're seeing in the test results an increase, which is saying that it's always been there. It's just we didn't have the expectations and we didn't communicate those to our kids well enough for them to feel as though, yeah, I can do this. And yeah, I'm going to take the risk and try it. And then hopefully the universities will come through and begin to start to provide those credits to them for what they've been doing. The literacy goal is right where we need to be. I know there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes as far as, okay, how are we interpreting this? How's that going to ultimately roll out? And part of that's just, it's a massive undertaking, and I think you're moving in the right direction. And Dr. Rice knows this, I always get concerned on how are we going to measure success. I get very concerned when we look at indicators like NAEP, which to me have major flaws. Personal opinion, but that's where I'm at. I do know the department will take into account other measurements. But I guess my message to locals would be work with your ISDs, work with your literacy leadership, work with the department to determine some internal data that you can look at for your students also. I know when I was a local superintendent, we relied more on our local data because our ISD had helped us at that point determine that if you, assess it this way, the data will give you some pretty reliable points. And from that you build, because it's the assessment, constant assessment, especially in literacy. It has to happen in order for you to begin to see growth, or this child is not progressing. What do we need to do with this one particular, this group of children? So again, I know that literacy is going to take on some new importance as it needs to for all of our K-3 and beyond. The only other thing I'd say about that is the importance of making sure the building administrators in particular have the same coaching, have the same support that the teachers do, because they need to work hand in hand with the teachers in interpreting that data and providing the support to the students and to their families, ultimately to their families, because it's got to happen at home also. So,
Coaches and the elementary principals.
and the elementary
Yeah,
principals.
without a doubt.
Without
a doubt.
So those are my
So,
comments.
Dr. Pritchett, I just want to add and focus on what you said about assessment at the local level. It's so important that the benchmark assessment at the local level aligns with the state standards. And I don't mean an alignment like this. So if our standards are here and this is the benchmark assessment, there's alignment like this. I mean a tight alignment. And districts have to look at to determine whether or not their local assessments, their benchmark assessments align tightly with the state assessments. And this will help increase student achievement because you're measuring along the way where students are on our standards.
I appreciate you lifting up the literacy work. It is evolving work. We'll be discussing it with the state board this afternoon as well in a more detailed presentation. Anything else for the good of the group? Once, twice, thrice. I want to thank the MDE team for their support in putting together a presentation. I want to thank particularly Ms. Kelly Siciliano-Carter for her work on the presentation, Mr. Dave Carlson. I'm not sure that Dave realized what he was getting into when he joined the MDE team, but we appreciate him coming aboard and being a part of that effort. And I also want to uplift the efforts across the state of local educators to improve the education of young people every single day. I see you, I see your work. You're bringing it every single day in a very, very challenging profession, and I appreciate you. Board, it is 12:08, and we are going to recess for lunch. We will come back together at 1 p.m. Enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, sir.